To the memory of my beloved, the author, Mr. William Shakespeare, signed by Ben Jonson. Invariably, orthodox Shakespeare scholars draw on honest Ben Jonson as their star witness in the Shakespeare First Folio, emphatically insisting he was no liar and would never have been party to a deception. 400 years later, having not witnessed these events and having never met Ben Jonson, orthodox Shakespeare scholars somehow just know these things. It seems Ben Jonson is the only man in the history of all humanity who never told a lie. We all leave this simplistic and infantile nonsense to the schoolman, which is of course demonstrably ridiculous and false. Let us first hear from the great man himself. It is an art to have so much judgment as to apparel a lie well, to give it a good dressing, that though the nakedness would show deformed and odious, the suiting of it might draw their readers. In his standard work on Ben Jonson, published by Harvard University Press, Professor Riggs provides an instructive appraisal of his subject and his sophisticated ability for ambiguities and falsehoods used to simultaneously conceal and reveal secret hidden truths. Like the Fairy Queen and Paradise Lost, Volpone forces its readers to work their way through a maze of seductive falsehoods. If they are any wiser at the end of the play, it is because they have withstood this assault on their moral bearings. Just as Volpone gulls his clients, Jonson gulls his audience, but Jonson's falsehood has the capacity to educate as well as to delude. The verse in the Shakespeare First Folio signed by Ben Jonson is headed, "To the memory of my beloved, the author, Mr. William Shakespeare, and what he hath left us." He has already revealed to us that he is privy to the secret that Bacon is the concealed author hidden behind the Droeshout mask at the front of the First Folio, for which he employed the pseudonym of William Shakespeare. Only a few years earlier, in a verse written for his 60th birthday party at York House on the 22nd of January 1621, Jonson hailed Bacon a happy genius, raising him to the wisdom of my king, who stands as if some mystery thou didst. During the period the Shakespeare First Folio was going through the Jaggard's printing presses, Jonson was living with Bacon at Gorhambury, working alongside him, preparing and composing some of its prefatory material. With his customary dexterity and using his powers of guile and ambiguity, Jonson repeatedly alludes to the secret identity of his beloved author, Bacon Shakespeare. He slyly hints that its hidden author is still alive. "Thou art a monument without a tomb, and art alive still, while thy book doth live," insinuating he is still literally alive as well as metaphorically through his work, which will be read until the end of time. Jonson's beloved poet Bacon Shakespeare outcompares all that Greece and Rome had to offer. In his posthumously published Meditations, Timber or Discoveries, Jonson again writes of his king Bacon by repeating the wording he used for him in his verse prefixed to the Shakespeare First Folio. In anticipation of so many of those contributors to the Memory containing commemorative verses published by Dr. Rawley, with whom Ben resided with at Gorhambury, in alluding to Bacon, Jonson freely conjures up the god Apollo. Jonson's allusion to Mercury also links with his own play, the parody Eastward Ho!, where the name of its key character is Francis Quicksilver, the Christian name of Francis Bacon, and Quicksilver, another term for Mercury, messenger of the gods, known for eloquence and communication. "And all the muses still were in their prime, when like Apollo he came forth to warm our ears, or like a Mercury to charm." Shortly after the supposed death of Francis Bacon in 1626, his private secretary and Rosicrucian brother Dr. William Rawley issued the Memory, containing 32 Latin elegies, wherein 11 of the versifiers held Bacon up as Apollo, leader of the 9 muses. Herein he is called another Apollo, described as greater than Apollo, and said that Apollo was fearful Bacon would replace him as king of the Muses. In returning to the comparative theme of insolent Greece and haughty Rome, his Rosicrucian brother, Rare Ben, very deliberately refers to the masked dramatist Terence to subtly communicate to the reader William Shakespeare of Stratford is merely a literary front for Bacon's Shakespeare. A decade earlier, the poet John Davis of Hereford issued his The Scourge of Folly, consisting of satirical epigrams, and others in honour of many noble and worthy persons of our land, which contained a sonnet addressed to his Rosicrucian master Sir Francis Bacon, wherein he very clearly identifies him as a concealed poet. In the verse, Davies contrasts Bacon's public life with his private or secret life, which he was clearly privy to, with the bounty law, which Bacon loathed, and beauty of his wit, the learned arts of poetry and drama, which was his first and last love. He refers to the bays, the poet's laurel wreath, a wreath made of bay leaves for a victor or poet, that deck which sits above what lies beneath, thy front, a person behind which to conceal his identity, i.e. William Shakespeare of Stratford. Mount Helicon is home to the Helicon Muses, the goddesses of poetical inspiration and poetry, his divine bel amour, meaning beautiful love. The secret that William Shakespeare was a literary mask for Bacon was communicated to the initiated or those with eyes to see in the same Scourge of Folly, in which Davies pointedly refers to Shakespeare as our English Terence. The phrase our English Terence in the title of the verse was very carefully and deliberately chosen. Terence was a Roman African slave known for being a mask for the writings of the Roman senators Scipio and Laelius, who wished to keep their authorship secret. Just as the actor Will Shakespeare, the hyphenated Shakespeare indicating it was a pseudonym, was a literary front or mask for Francis Bacon, who wished likewise to conceal his secret authorship of the Shakespeare plays. In his verse, Ben Jonson refers to the soul of the age as the sweet swan of Avon. In typical Johnsonian fashion, the ambiguous line is introduced for the purposes of misleading those simple souls who merely read and understand things on a literal plane. Sweet swan of Avon, what a sight it were to see thee in our waters yet appear, and make those flights upon the banks of Thames that so did take Eliza and our James. On one level, read literally, it seems to be an apparent allusion to William Shakespeare of Stratford upon Avon, perhaps as a misdirection for maintaining the pious Rosicrucian illusion of Bacon's pseudonymity. However, the word Avon is actually from Celtic origin, literally meaning river, sweet swan of the river. Nevertheless, the true multi-layered meaning and significance of the line is best understood in light of a passage in Bacon's De Augmentis, published just a few weeks before the First Folio. We know that around this time Jonson was assisting Bacon in translating his essays, and several writers have expressed the view that there is every possibility he assisted him in translating other works. It is probable that he, Jonson, assisted him in the preparation of the Novum Organum, which was published in 1620. And it is an undoubted fact that the Latin of the De Augmentis, which was published in 1623, was the work of Jonson. Whether or not Jonson assisted in the translation of the De Augmentis, he was undoubtedly familiar with its contents. In Book 2, Chapter 7, where Bacon discusses the division of perfect history into chronicles, lives and relations, and explanation thereof, he draws attention to the curiosity that so little is known of the many eminent lives in his own time, and how it was that swans would carry medals with the names of the dead to a certain temple consecrate to immortality. He feigns that at the end of the thread or web of every man's life there hangs a little medal or collar on which his name is stamped, and that time waits upon the shears of Atropos, and as soon as the thread is cut, snatches the medals, carries them off, and presently throws them into the river Lethe. And about the river there are many birds flying up and down, who catch the medals, and after carrying them around and round in their beak a little while, let them fall into the river. Only there are a few swans, which if they get a medal with a name, immediately carry it off to a temple consecrated to immortality. The artful Jonson knew the nom de plume Shakespeare would stealthily secure for Bacon his unparalleled place in the pantheon of immortality, one secretly safeguarded for posterity by a divine Baconian swan, carried on to immortality by his Rosicrucian Freemasonry brotherhood. With his Rosicrucian Freemasonic Grandmaster Bacon, Rare Ben had a love of anagrams, and he thoughtfully incorporated one in the last 6 lines of his verse, to the memory of my beloved, the author, Mr. William Shakespeare, communicating a secret message to posterity regarding the true identity of our immortal poet Shakespeare, by spelling out down the left-hand side his name, Bacon. Jonson's standing as the so-called star witness for the Stratfordian illusion that William Shakespeare from Stratford wrote the Shakespeare works is ambiguous. Jonson, whose love and skill for anagrams, ciphers, word puzzles and parodies, who with his friend Francis Bacon could never pass by a jest, repeatedly conveys to us that his confidant and Rosicrucian brother Francis Bacon is our secret Shakespeare.